What is going on, guys? In today's video I will show you the top 3 best Path of Exile 2 builds in 2025. So in this guide I will give you a quick overview of each setup, then I will explain what skill gems and upgrades should you focus on. Then as well we'll see what is the best gear and how to get it for both leveling and endgame. And then finally we will go over the passive tree, stats, your skill rotations, and even what Atlas passive should you use, so we would be able to get the highest damage possible and much more. If you are looking for any of these builds on the website, then click my link in this video's description or the pinned comment. This is an amazing, low-budget endgame build that pretty much just runs insanely fast and throws out poisonous concoctions at your enemies, which spreads through hundreds of targets and destroys them in split seconds. The more monsters, the higher our poison buildup gets, so we don't have to worry about no rotations or the perfect damage uptime, as our automatic poison scaling does all of this by itself. On top of this, specifically for endgame, we are going to be using the Chaos Inoculation to become immune to chaos damage, and then scale the energy shield as our defense. So if you want to zoom through the content in few seconds and destroy everything standing in our way, then this is it. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the Ranger and our ascendancy is the Pathfinder. Then for the first skill we have the Poisonous Concoction with the support gems such as the Scatter Shot, Chaos Infusion, Close Combat, Chaos Mastery, and the Deadly Poison. Then second we get Divine Arrow with the Fawn of Rage, Fawn of Mana, and Martial Tempo. Then next we got the Despair with the Heightened Curse. Next we have Contagion with the Chaotic Freeze, Magnified Effect, Arcane Tempo, and Mobility. Next up we have the Ghost Dance with the Fast Forward and Herbalism. Next we got the Grim Feast with no support gem. Then next we have the Eye of Winter with the Withering Touch, Unleash, Persistence, and Inspiration. And finally for the last one we are using the Wind Dancer with the Blind and Maim. As you can see, most of this setup is structured around using the Poisonous Concoction to delete huge amount of enemies in few seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their duration and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this projectile damage node, and then go like this while taking these 4. So Blur, Combat Alchemy, Honed Instincts, and the Clean Shot. Then next we keep on going until this point, and then also grab all of these. So Master Fletching, Stacking Toxins, Lasting Toxins, Escape Velocity, and the Freedom of Movement. Then from here we want to circle back a little and take this one node called the Crippling Toxins. Then afterwards we now go like this and then take the right, and from here just keep on going while also taking the Leeching Toxins and the Kite Runner. And then from this point you can unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to get Brew Concoction, as this gives you the option to pick the Poisonous Concoction that provides us with our main skill and the core of our build. Then second we get the Contagious Contamination, which mostly saves us from having to run the Herald of the Plague, which costs about 30 spirit. Then third we get the Overwhelming Toxicity, which doubles our poison damage assuming that we can keep up with our poison stacks. And then finally for the last one we got the Traveler's Wisdom, which gives us 6 extra passive nodes. This might not sound like much, but at the endgame we can see a huge impact, especially if we spend them on more energy shields. So feel free to use the exact same path as I have right here. And don't forget to check this video's description to find the link for this website, and this should make it easier for you to follow the tree. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and this build will benefit a lot from a high pack size, so that our poison can spread through and use the Contagious Contamination. In-game activities with bunch of monsters like the Breach is great for our build. So then when we start we wanna first of all go to the left side and get all of these nodes. Then now go to the right and get all of these nodes as well. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this we have even more passives, which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter. So this is again up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Now in the next part we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the Widow Whale with as much quiver effect as possible, so at least 220% is highly recommended, as this makes you hit 300% breakpoint with alpha nodes on the passive skill tree. However, if you are going full solo and you don't have a Widow Whale, then you won't use any bow that has a plus levels of all projectile skills, or pretty much anything else that would increase our DPS. On top of this, we also are using an offhand called the Fire Quiver, and the most powerful thing on this one is increased damage with the bow skills. However, I've heard that developers might nerf it soon, so if that happens, then look for stats to plus levels of all projectile skills and more dexterity. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Feather Tiara, and here pretty much we wanna get as much energy shield as possible. Also, max life and intelligence are useful too. Then for the chest we have the Ghost Wrath. This will convert part of your life to the energy shield. This will apply before the Chaos Inoculation node, and will give us pretty much as much energy shield as other body armor. However, if you can't afford this, then for the budget versions, try to look for anything similar, with a high evasion and energy shield. Then for the belt we have the Fine Belt with a faster flask recovery, max life, max mana, more charm slots and lightning resistance. However, if you don't use the Ghost Wrath, then the max life is a useless stat, so in that case go with more evasion. Then for gloves we got the Advanced Spiral Warps, and here also we want to go with as much evasion and energy shield as possible. On top of this is a good place to get free resistance like Chaos and Fire. Then for boots we're using Advanced Silk Slippers, and here the biggest priority is as much movement speed as possible, while also getting all the resistances and evasion or max energy shield. Then for the first ring we got the Prismatic Ring, with percentage to all elemental resistances. And for bonus stats we want accuracy, max life, strength and lightning resistance. While for the second one we have the Sapphire Ring with a cold resistance. And for more we got evasion, max life and fire resistance. And then finally for the amulet we have the Solar Amulet, which gives us more spirit. This is the hardest piece of the gear to get perfected, and after you finish maximizing your quiver, this should be the next place where to invest most of your time into. And for stats we want max energy shield, max life, levels of all projectile skills, more strength and intelligence. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. So while running around in a map, you should not be using anything more than just the poisonous concoction. Rare monsters will die very fast because of the poison that gets spread through them from the contamination passive. However, in a situation where the pack size is high, like in the breaches, you then want to use the contagion skill to spread poison in an even bigger area than contagious contamination does by itself. And then second for bossing. This time we want to start with a couple of fine arrows before the boss becomes targetable. Then activate Despair. Then afterwards use Contagion to enable the freezing boss, and finally use Eye of Winter for massive DPS. And after all of this, you can simply spam Poisonous Concoction. This setup is known as the Chaos Demon build, which has low life but very high energy shield, where you are constantly balancing your health bar as a resource to fuel your demon flame. The more flame stacks you get, the more damage you deal, but the harder your form is to maintain. However, this build is very cheap to acquire, and very strong already in the beginning stages of progression. On top of this, for our gear we want to build as high life regeneration as possible. So if you like to destroy everything that stands in your way, and don't mind a bit of a build up to get to the highest damage possible, then this is the one for you. So let me show you the build, and for the main class I have chosen to go with the Witch, and our ascendancy is the Infernalist. Then for the first skill we have the Hex Blast with the support gems such as Inspiration, Arcane Surge, Control Destruction, Arcane Tempo and Chaos Mastery. Then second we get Contagion with Chaotic Freeze, Hinder and Encumbrance. Then next we have Blasphemy with Despair and Magnified Effect. Next we have Withering Presence with the Clarity. Next up we have the Essence Drain with the Swift Affliction, Envenom and Persistence. Next we got Grim Feast with the Cannibalism and Clarity. Next we have Arctic Armor with the Cold Mastery, Glacianation and Deep Freeze. Then next we got the Demon Form with a Second Wind and Vitality. And finally for the last one we are using Summon Infernal Hound with the Last Gasp, Elemental Army, Meat Shield and the Culling Strike. As you can see, most of this setup is structured around using the Hex Blast and the Demon Form to delete enemies in seconds, so we use gems and skills that will support and increase their size and damage. while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree. And if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and our main objective is to look for energy shield and a mana regeneration. Then also we'll get some cast speed, AoV effect, utility in the form of the anti-stun and the anti-freeze, and finally we also need Javel sockets. So first off we start at this energy shield node, and then get all of these. So open mind, pure energy, practice signs, dampening shield, and a mana blessing. Then second of all we want to move to the right and then get all of these. So the circle plus the zone of the control and the aestheticism. Then now we want to circle back, and then from here just keep on going until you get to the arcane blossom. Then next we want to move until to the end and then move to the right. And then from here unlock all of these nodes. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you prefer. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again. And for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to unlock the Demonic Possession to get the Demon Form skill. Then second, get the Loyal Hellhound. Then next we want to go with the Altered Flesh. And then finally go with this small spell node and the mana node. And next up we have our Atlas passives. So when we start we want to first of all go to the left side and then get all of these nodes. And then keep going until you get to this keystone called Deadly Evolution. And then from this point and onwards you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this we have even more passives. Which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter, so again it's up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have the bosses, and then on top of that we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Next we have our gear. This time our weapon and the offhand doesn't really matter, because when we transform into the demon form, which is going to be pretty much 24/7, then the game stops scaling the damage from our weapon, so which one you choose doesn't really matter. But then while you're leveling and not yet ready to take the leap into the main demon form, then for the weapon and the offhand you want to go with the attuned wand and the crystal focus. While for bonuses you want pretty much anything that will increase your spell damage and life regeneration. Then for helmet we have the expert chain tiara with the energy shield. And for more we want max and increased energy shield, then also max mana and fire and cold resistance, as well as life regen every second. Then for the chest we have the Ghost Wrath with the energy shield. And for more we got max energy shield, chaos resistance, and most importantly 50% of the max life is now converted to the energy shield. This is yet another reason of why we want to build life and shield as high as possible. But like per most of my builds, this item is not required. And you can go with similar chest pieces as well. But if you're looking for the best in slot, then this is the one for you. Then for the belt we have the utility belt with 20% flask recovery. And for bonus stats we got max mana, cold and lightning resistance, as well as life regeneration per second. Then for gloves we got the expert Sombri gloves with the energy shield. And for more we got max and increased energy shield, then max mana, and finally fire, cold and lightning resistance. Then for boots we're using the expert feathered sandals with the energy shield. And for more we got increased movement speed, max energy shield, max mana, fire and cold resistance, as well as life regen every second. Then for the first ring we got the Minx Heart. Again this is not required, but for bonuses we got chaos resistance, reduced max life, but now we gain from 30 to 40% more damage as extra chaos damage. As we have built insane amount of life regen and energy shield, so we can easily sacrifice this and trade a bit of defense for insane amount of damage. While then for the second one we have the ruby ring with the fire resistance. And for more we want max energy shield, life regen every second, and fire and cold resistance. And then finally for the amulet we got the gold amulet with increased rarity to items. And then for more we need max energy shield, max mana, more to spirit, levels of all spell skills, more percentage to all elemental resistances, and life regeneration per second. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup, which would be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And as you can see from the gameplay, this is one of the easiest and simplest builds in the game. So our main rotation is just to spam the Contagion and a Hex Blast for easy to kill monsters, which are most of our targets. But then specifically for bosses, you then want to use the Contagion, then afterwards the Essence Drain, and then finish it off with the Hex Blast. This will give you a great buff and insane amount of chaos damage for single targets. And finally, if you're low geared and run into a mana problem, especially against bosses, then try to get one Javel with the mana on kill or mana on kill from the offhand. Also, this might sound obvious, especially at the beginning, when you may not have unlocked the mana on kill, but if you run out of mana, then just simply cast less skills and wait. You will be doing very high damage anyways, so casting few less skills won't really impact the gameplay that much, but it may reduce your mana consumption, especially if you're undergeared or underleveled. This setup is known as the Hammer of the Gods build, where we are going to be smashing through the enemies by mainly using the Stampede, in combination with the Hammer of the Gods for AoV, and Earth Shatter for single target DPS. By us using Devastate and Armor Explosion support gems, we are going to be doing this massive amount of explosions, and smashing everything and everyone that stands in our way. On top of this, we are also going to be building on our block, which will allow us to mitigate majority of the enemy attacks. And by using this with the Surrender, it will transform us into a god that is virtually unkillable, even if you get overwhelmed by hundreds of enemies. So let me show you the build, and for the main class, I have chosen to go with the Warrior, and our ascendancy is the Titan. Then for the first skill, we have the Earth Shatter with the support gems such as the Upheal, Splinter, Font of Rage and Brutality. Then second, we get the Hammer of the Gods with the Rage Forge, Heavy Swing, Fist of War, Exploit Weakness and Lacerate. Then next we get the Seismic Cry with the Dazing Cry and Inspiration. Next we have Infernal Cry with Premeditation, Enrage War Cry, Raging Cry and the Life Tap. Next up we have the Berserk with the Clarity, Cannibalism and Herbalism. Next we got the Shield Charge with the Stomping Ground. Next we have Stampede with the Aftershock, Cold Infusion, Momentum, Martial Tempo and the Close Combat. Next up we have the Leap Slam with the Holy Descent and Rage. And finally, for the last one, we are using the Herald of the Ice with the Cold Mastery, Magnified Effect, Primal Armament, Cold Penetration and the Long Shot. Currently, this Herald of the Ice buff is completely OP and broken, so if you truly want to maximize your endgame damage, then we definitely want to integrate this skill into our Warrior build as well. Most of this setup is structured around using the Stampede and the Hammer of the Gods to delete huge amount of enemies in seconds. So we use gems and skills that will support and increase their cooldowns and damage, while the rest are powerful buffs and utility skills that usually get activated in the background. Next up we have our passive tree, and if you are interested in a full in-depth guide on how it works, then check out my beginner guide. So let's take a look at our setup, and we want to start at this melee damage node, and then go like this while grabbing all of these. So Defender's Resolve, Relentless Brutal, Reverberating Impact and Smash. Then from here we keep on going until we get to these. So Admonisher, Shockwave, Singular Purpose and the Aftershock. Then next we now go down here and get all of these Shank nodes. Then afterwards we keep going like this and then get these three. So Vigilance, Internal Bleeding and the Heat Proofing. Then from here we now circle back a little, and from this point just keep on going until the end. And now go to this bottom part and then lastly get the Brute Shank node and the Giant's Blood Keystone. And then from this point you can unlock all the other nodes in whatever order you prefer. And then now let's go all the way to the middle again, and for Ascendancy build, this is what we have. So at the beginning you want to get Colossal Capacity, which provides you with easy 23 extra inventory slots. Then second, get the Hulking Form. This is one of the strongest Ascendancy nodes in the game, which gives us a massive bonus to all the small passive nodes. Then third, we get the Earthbreaker, which gives you an additional 20% chance for your slams to Aftershock, which is a 20% more damage bonus. It also gives you almost a 100% chance to trigger the Aftershock on the Stampede. And then finally we want to go with the Crushing Impact. This will allow our Crushing Blow to heavy stun a lot more consistently, enabling the Devastate and Armor Explosion combo to create massive explosions. Next up we have our Atlas passives, and the general idea behind this is to aim for bonus passives that spawn a lot of grouped up monsters, such as in expeditions or in rituals. So when we start, we want to first of all go to the left side and then get all of these nodes. Then next, now we go to the right and get all of these nodes as well. And then from this point and onwards, you can unlock the rest of the nodes in whatever order you want. But then on top of this, we have even more passives, which order in which you unlock them doesn't really matter, so this is again up to you. And this is how it should look like for the ritual. Then next we have Delirium. Then third we have bosses, And then on top of that, we have the pinnacle bosses. Then next we also have our expedition setup, and then finally our breach setup. Then in the next part we have our gear. The weapon of our choice is the expert lead-in great hammer with a crit and weapon speed. And for bonus stats we want increased physical damage, more accuracy, the option for all 4 attacks to always hit, then also increased attack speed, more levels of all melee skills, and leech physical damage as mana. Then on top of this, we also have an offhand called the Advanced Stone Tower Shield, with armor and new skill. And for more we got increased block chance, more to armor, max life and more additional physical damage reduction. Then for the helmet we have the Expert Elite Great Helm with the armor, and for more we want even more armor, then max life, max mana and fire, cold and chaos resistance. Then for chest we have the Expert Steel Plate with armor. And for more we got life regen every second, more and increased armor, then also max life, and cold and lightning resistance. Then for the belt we have the raw hide with increased life flask recovery. And for bonus stats we want max life, armor, more strength and cold resistance. Then for gloves we got the expert riveted mids with armor, and for more we want adds physical and lightning damage to attacks, also max mana, increased attack speed, more strength and fire resistance. Then for boots we're using the expert iron greaves with armor, and for more we want increased movement speed, max life, max mana, strength, cold and fire resistance. Then for the first ring we got the prismatic ring with more percentage of all elemental resistances, and for more we want add physical damage to attacks, evasion, max life, strength, lightning and chaos resistance. While for the second one we have the amethyst ring with a chaos resistance, and for more we want add lightning damage to attacks, max life, strength, cold and lightning resistance. And then finally for amulet we have the jade amulet with dexterity, and for more we got max life, strength, intelligence and lightning resistance. No matter which gear you choose, just at least try to get 75% resistance cap on all 4 elements. This is a starter setup which should be more of an example of what stats and prefixes to look for. And now finally, let's quickly take a look at how this build will work. And I will give you 2 rotations, so one for single target and one for AoV. So first up we have the single target, and for bosses we want to preemptively stack as many earth shatter spikes as possible, and then explode them with a seismic cry when they start fighting you. You want to keep doing this until the boss gets heavy stunned, and then use both seismic cry and infernal cry, and then finally finish it off with the hammer of the gods. And then second of all we have AoV, and here simply while clearing mobs, we want to stampede into the monsters, and alternate infernal cry and seismic cry between each cast.